Good morning, everybody. This is Jose Valdivia from the ASQ Innovation Division. Today, we're about to hear a presentation from Mrs. Jane Keathley. And right now, we're still waiting for some participants to join us. I see that we're using the Hangouts on air for the first time. So we are going to be waiting for some additional participants to join us. So please bear with us. All right, I see that we have 2 viewers, and let's give folks a couple of more minutes to join us.
Is Ian on?
Yeah, I see 2 viewers that have joined us, so 3 viewers. Numbers going up. Technology seems to be working. Okay. So we're going to give folks 1 more minute, and then we can get started. Once we finish this presentation, this is going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel of ASQ Innovation. So folks will be able to enjoy the presentation later on if needed. Jane, I think we can get started. We have given folks 5 minutes. I think we have viewers joining us in this first time Google Hangouts and Air, 5 viewers right now. And I think that most people might be joining later us. So let's get started. So today's webinar, brought to you by ASQ Innovation, is going to be the presenter Jane Keathley. Jane helps organizations develop quality management systems that integrate with innovation management. Her professional career spans medical device software development, clinical research, biopharma manufacturing, and diagnostic microbiology. Jane is a senior member, ASQ, vice chair of ASQ Innovation Division, and past chair of ASQ PAR Innovation Award Committee. She is co-author of the Executive Guide to Innovation, Turning Good Ideas into Great Results. She has served as an examiner for multiple cycles of the Virginia SPQA program and National Bullrich for Performance Excellence program. Jane holds degrees in medical microbiology and medical technology. Please, I'm very pleased to welcome Jane in being our first presenter for 2016. And well, welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Jose. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. All right. Jose, can you see my slide?
I can see the slide. If you can put it in reading mode.
Okay.
Great.
There we go.
And I'm gonna, yeah, I'm gonna block my camera for a second.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. I look forward to presenting this information and hopefully hearing from some of you. There's a chat room for questions. And before we dive into this topic of whether something is innovation or improvement, I just wanted to mention a couple of things about the Innovation Division. We will be present at the World Conference coming up in May in Milwaukee. And if you are fortunate enough to be attending the World Conference, please join us for our business meeting, the Innovation Division business meeting, which will be held on Sunday at 1 p.m. We are hosting a booth in the exhibit area and would love to have you help us there if you've got some time to spare. It's also a fun activity, and you'll get to know some of the other Innovation Division members if you can spend a little time there. In any event, please come by and visit us. And we will be tweeting and broadcasting through Periscope from the conference. So if you can't be there, please plan to follow us on Twitter. Another thing I want to mention is our fall conference coming up this year in San Diego. We are partnering with the San Diego section. The conference will be October 14th and 15th. The call for papers is now open. Please consider submitting a paper and sharing some of your experiences on innovation and quality with the group at our conference. We would love to hear from you. You can get additional information about the conference at the website, and I look forward to hearing from you about that. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. And lastly, just wanted to mention that we do have a website, asq.org/innovation-group. And you can always get information about the Innovation Division, some of the things we're doing, resources, things like that at our website. So hope you'll visit that. So on to our topic. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I was hearing things like, well, that's not innovation, that's just improvement. Usually said with a bit of scorn, like this person doesn't really know what innovation is all about. But yet, everywhere you look, you see claims of innovation. Every ad campaign around these days uses innovation to either describe the product or the company or something about their marketing message. So everybody believes they're innovative, and everybody believes the other person is not innovative. They're only improving something. And so I decided to do a little research into that magical line between improvement and innovation. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. We'll talk about the integrated roles of continuous improvement and innovation in maintaining high levels of organizational performance. We'll also identify models for balancing improvement and innovation initiatives. So that's what we're going to talk about. I decided to start with the concept of wearable technology. And a reviewer of wearable technology named Haley Tsukiyama publishes a lot on technology. She's a very good reporter. And this particular phrase caught my eye. She said, for wearable technology to take off, it must make life more convenient, and it must easily fit into everyday life. And finally, it needs to look like something you'd want to be seen wearing. I thought, well, these are kind of lay out the requirements for successful wearable technology. And based on that, I looked around a little bit and came across the idea of smart shoes. And smart shoes came about back in 2002 after a very famous kidnapping case where a young girl was kidnapped and held hostage basically for months before she was found and returned to her family. About that time, the idea came out of putting a GPS unit in kids' shoes so that if they got kidnapped or got lost, parents could find them. So that was sort of the innovative idea, combining that technology of GPS with shoes. Well, it was a great idea. It didn't really take off for a couple of reasons. One, the shoes were very expensive, and kids grow so fast that they go through a lot of shoes. And for parents to be replacing them constantly with these expensive GPS shoes was impractical. Kids generally have more than one pair of shoes, too, at any given time. The other thing is that kids kick their shoes off, or a kidnapper could easily remove their shoes. So it didn't really take off as a real useful idea until a few years later, when another professor, it turns out this time, said, you know, I think these would work well in elderly population with the increasing incidence of Alzheimer's and dementia conditions. Older people tend to wander off and can get lost. They don't go through as many shoes as a kid would. And maybe there's an opportunity there to help find these elderly people if they get lost. And in fact, in 2012, this idea of using GPS shoes for elderly people was named one of the top 100 innovations of mankind. How about that? Somebody thought that was a really good idea. The next kind of idea that came along in the idea in the model of smart shoes was, well, if you have the GPS technology built into the shoe, you are limited to one or two pairs of shoes. You wouldn't want a closet full of these still kind of expensive shoes. And someone came up with the idea of building it into the insole that could then be taken out and inserted into a different pair of shoes. So you just had to have one GPS unit that would work with multiple pairs of shoes. Well, that obviously saves on costs and saves on having to have a closet full of shoes like this. So, you know, things are progressive, things are evolving in the smart shoe world. And the latest thing I came across was this. And this is a pair of what's called destination walking shoes, or GPS click heels shoes, because of the idea of the Wizard of Oz and how Dorothy could click her shoes and go home. So this shoe took the idea of GPS technology a step further and actually inserted LED lights in the toes. So the LED lights you can see here, the one on the left shoe has a row of lights that tells you what direction to go. Now that one tells you how close you're getting to your destination. The right shoe has the circular pattern of LED lights that point you in the direction that you need to turn. And so using these shoes, you're never lost. Your GPS unit keeps your coordinates straight, and the shoes direct you in the direction to go and let you know how close you're getting. So again, an evolution, you know, a change in the idea of smart shoes. So I ask you, is this an improvement or an innovation? The world's first fully functional pair of GPS shoes that will guide the wearer to any destination uses traditional craftsmanship, added new technology, built on the earlier models of the GPS shoe, and added LED. So I don't know, what do you think? Ask yourself, was this an innovation or an improvement? Or at what point did it become an improvement over an innovation? So some of the factors that you might consider are the GPS technology combined with shoes. That was kind of innovative and new. The whole concept of wearable technology, however, has been around a long time, decades really. I can remember probably 30 years ago hearing a talk from MIT about wearable technology and was kind of blown away by it. But it was in the early research stages then. And now it's not only available commercially, but available in a lot of different aspects of wearable technology. There's also the early shoes combined cell phone technology with the GPS so that parents could pick up on the GPS coordinates of their kids. So there's a lot of different technology coming to bear here. And as we've talked, it came out first for lost children, then for lost seniors, then for multi-shoe use, and now for destination walking. Well, while you think about that, let's look at a different example. And this you may or may not recognize is one of the first smart watches. This was called the Pebble Watch. Actually, this was the second generation that they called the Pebble Steel. And if you think back to Tsukiyama's requirements, it's wearable. It looks like something you wouldn't mind being seen wearing, although that big face may be a little bit of a put off for some people, but it's not too strange or outrageous. And the big question with the early versions of the smartwatch were how valuable it was. They worked, again, with cell phone technology, and one of the big questions was, how much does this add over your cell phone? Is it easier to look at your smartwatch, which at the time had very limited functionality? It could tell you that you had a new email and who it was from, and that was about it. So the big value was you could look at your watch in a meeting and decide if you needed to pull your cell phone out or excuse yourself to go see the whole email or not. That's pretty limited value add, but it was new technology and it was pretty exciting. Another innovative aspect about the early Pebble watches is that the company got its money through a Kickstarter campaign, and that was back when Kickstarter and online financing and funding was pretty unusual. So they were one of the early successful startups that got their money from a Kickstarter campaign. But it didn't take long before some of the other electronics manufacturers were cranking out smartwatches. Samsung had one, Sony had one that within a year. LG got into the market space, each one adding a little bit more in terms of features, a little bit different design, until most recently, I'm sure you'll recognize the Apple Watch here. Apple jumped in, and guess who got most of the credit for being innovative? Apple, even though they were basically copying technology and product concepts from their many, many predecessors. So again, I ask, where did this transition, if it did, from being an innovation to an improvement? Or was it an innovation the whole time, or was it simply an improvement the whole time? The first Pebble Steel models had a traditional appearance, but very basic information. They worked only with cell phone technology, and they were very expensive, didn't support Facebook or any of the social media sites. Those features are being added as the new models come available. So in order to kind of decide if we are looking at innovation or improvement, we probably need a definition. And this is a definition that we use in the innovation division. It's pretty consistent with the good innovation definitions that are out there. And the whole idea here is that innovation requires something new, new knowledge, new information that is incorporated or turned into products, processes, and services that provide new value. So you have to have something new, some new knowledge or information, and you have to provide new value. In the marketplace says that you have to have somebody that will use it, and generally speaking, that means somebody that will pay money to use it. That's what constitutes an innovation. You can have innovation in your products, which we just discussed with the two examples I provided, but you can also innovate services. You can innovate your manufacturing processes and other processes around your delivery. And you can innovate your product, your business model, which tends to be maybe the highest risk, but also the biggest payoff. And people tend to forget that. We get so focused on innovating products that we tend to not step back and look at our entire business model and what the opportunities for innovation are there. What's improvement then? Well, improvement, according to Oxford Dictionary, is to make or become better, all right? And continuous improvement, which we're all very familiar with in our quality roles, is the ongoing improvement of products, services, or processes through, and this is important, incremental and breakthrough improvements. So you can have breakthrough improvements. Isn't that interesting? Well, then how are innovation and improvement different? We generally think that innovation is radical, disruptive, inventive, and improvement is incremental, minor, imitative. But we just saw that continuous improvement can be breakthrough. So are these perceptions accurate? Let's explore that a little bit more. Deming recognized the integration and the interdependency of improvement and innovation. He felt that you really needed, in an organization, you need to start by improving your existing processes, number one on this chart. And only then, if you can improve your processes, now you can go on to improving your existing products and services. And using that as your basis, your infrastructure, you can now go on to innovating your processes, coming up with new and new value kinds of processes. And then finally, you can innovate your products and services. But he believed that you had to have your improvement system in place and well functioning before you could go on and be innovative. So there's definitely a relationship there. One way to think about it is that there's an overlap. You can have innovations that aren't improvements. So for example, some of the earliest electric cars were definitely innovations because they incorporated new technology, new battery technology and things like that. And they added some value in terms of their low emissions and being environmentally sound and friendly. But the value concept was limited. There was not an infrastructure to recharge them. They were very, very expensive. You might say they still are in that area. So they were innovative, but not necessarily improvements. And of course, you can think of improvements that aren't innovative. Something as simple as cleaning out under the refrigerator is an improvement because you got rid of some dirt in your house, but it isn't necessarily innovative unless you came up with a really unique way of cleaning the floor in your house. So I think you can identify things that are at either end, but the vast majority of things that we're talking about fall in that middle overlap area of being both innovative and improvement. And if you think about it, if an innovation has to add value to be successful and to be considered a true innovation, that add value generally means it's got to be an improvement. So I tend to think of this as a spectrum, and within that both, the things that are both innovative and improvement fall on a spectrum. You have at one end the breakthrough end. This is where you have your disruptive innovations and your breakthrough improvements. At the other end, you have improvements that might be tweaks or imitative kinds of changes that you're incorporating something new to add value, but it's not breakthrough or radical. And then in the middle, you have what we often refer to as sustaining innovations or continuous improvements. So I'd like to explore that idea a little bit more. There's a lot of gray zones in that spectrum. And one way I think about it is the first time something's ever made available to the marketplace, it's probably an innovation. And certainly on the innovative end of that spectrum I talked about. So if we use the electric cars, the earliest electric cars were innovative. But then a second provider comes along. And now they're offering their own version of an electric car. Well, is that now simply an improvement, or is that an innovation for them? I think it's, again, on the innovative end of the spectrum, maybe a little bit to the right, a little bit more to the improvement side, but not much. It's still innovative. Or maybe the original developer starts a second locality. They take it to another country or to a different geographic area. Now it's an innovation in that locality. The second time this happens, it gets a little bit further away from the innovative side and a little bit closer to the improvement side until you get to the nth time, the nth provider, the nth locality, where now it's really a commodity and very much on the improvement side and not innovation. You know, this is where the very late adopters come in. And again, it might be an innovation for them, but it's more improvement than innovation at this point. Another example, the tablet technology. Apple's iPad was, pretty innovative. They were pretty much the first provider of this technology. And they put this in the market as a combination of the e-book and limited laptop functionality. And I can remember thinking, who needs that? I've got a laptop, I've got a cell phone. I can't imagine needing an iPad. And I didn't buy the first model, the iPad 1. I was a Luddite, I was a late adopter, but I did go out and get an iPad 2, and I found it to be very convenient and very useful. And so did a lot of competitors. Very quickly, there were Android and Windows tablets. And very soon after that, Apple came out with new models, the Mini, the Air, the new Mini. All the competitors came out with Minis. Meanwhile, cell phones were getting bigger and got almost as big as the Minis. And now you can get every range from a large laptop all the way down to a tiny cell phone. There's some sort of smart technology for you that does a lot of stuff. So when was this an innovation, and when did it become only an improvement? Again, I think that there's a strong case to be made for this spectrum, where at the end, the one end you have radical innovation, at the other end you have minor improvements, and any range of situations in between. In fact, I think it's kind of pointless to argue about black and white definitions of innovation and improvement and where the line ends between the two. It's just it's a semantics discussion and not really all that useful. What's better is to have a common conceptual understanding and work with that. Another point that I want to make is the idea of the context of innovation. I think along that spectrum, you have to consider the idea of the context of that innovation. If it's new to the world, yes, that's probably pretty innovative. If it's new to the industry or sector, again, innovative, maybe a little closer to the improvement side. New to the region or business, again, innovative for that, in that context, not necessarily in the world context, but you can't say it's not innovative if your business starts something new that nobody else has been doing, or that somebody in a different business has been doing and you've just adopted it now. It's innovative for you and shouldn't be discounted or discarded as simply an improvement. New to the organization. So there's these different contexts that it's useful to keep that in mind when you're trying to define whether something is innovative or not. Some people have actually advocated getting rid of the terms innovation and improvement and coming up with new terms, something like incrovation, which would be the incremental side of things, and radovation, which would be the radical disruptive breakthrough side. Don't know if that'll catch on, but it's a thoughtful idea. What's probably most important is that we understand this spectrum and that we understand the need to operate across the spectrum. So we need to have improvements, continuous improvements. We need to be able to correct problems and defects, make those kind of basic low-level improvements. We need to be able to prevent future problems, which gets a little more forward-looking and a little more into the innovation realm. We need to be able to bring in external information, definitely more in the innovation realm. We can't be navel-gazing and sit inside our four walls. We need to get outside in order to continue to improve and innovate. But we also need to be able to create new solutions. If we want long-term sustainability and high levels of success, we can't just keep correcting problems and preventing future problems. We need to be out there looking for new solutions. So managing across that spectrum is pretty key. And to do that, we have to be able to find a balance. We need to understand our competitive position. What's out there in the marketplace? What are we up against? We need to have a good understanding of our product maturity, as we'll see in a moment. Which ones are getting dated and older and are going to need to be replaced? What are our core competencies? You want to think of new solutions, but you don't want to go too far away from your core competencies because that increases the risks and the opportunities for failures. So you have to keep that in mind. Build on your improvement system, as Deming said, and understand your risk tolerance. Some organizations are better positioned either financially or mentally to take on higher risks than others. So you just need to understand that and work with that. These are going to help you identify the right balance. whatever model you choose, you need to integrate it into the organization. There's lots of ways to integrate improvement and innovation. I think the key message here is they need to be in communication with each other. You want to avoid isolated improvement systems from innovation systems. And some companies will do this. They'll have their improvement system is, in operations and quality, while they have a whole different unit in research and development or product marketing that's doing their innovation stuff, and the two never talk. And I think that's dangerous because you lose sight of the opportunities coming out of your improvement system. You run the risk of getting too far away from your core competencies and taking on more risk than maybe you're ready for if you don't keep the improvement system in mind. So it's very important for those two to be talking to each other, not siloed from each other. Ideally, they're completely integrated, and improvement and innovation are functioning together, perhaps as one unit. But there are models that have been very successful that do separate them a little bit, but they still have systematic and formal interactions between the two. So for example, on your improvement day-to-day operations side, you might identify some key individuals who cross over. They spend time doing operations, but they also have some level of responsibility, some percentage of their time that's committed to the innovation, new product development side of the house. So they're the contact between the two. So there, like I say, there's lots of models you can adopt. You have to figure out what works well, but the one I would definitely not do is where your innovation and improvement are completely siloed. Another point is to keep both efforts in line with your company strategies. Once your company has identified, or your organization has identified its strategic objectives, improvement and innovation are how you are going to meet those objectives. So always keep your strategies in mind and out front so that your innovation and improvement activities are aligned with them. All right, I'm going to spend a few minutes on some tools that you can use. These are just 3 examples. There are lots of tools out there. These are written up in our book, The Executive Guide to Innovation, along with a number of other tools in the appendix. So if you want more information on tools, I would refer you to that book. But the 3 that we'll talk about today are the Innovation Ambition Matrix, the Decision or Pew Matrix, and Value Factor Analyses. The Innovation Ambition Matrix is a model based on 2 factors: how to win and where to play. And you can see, based on those metrics or characteristics, you can then categorize your innovation efforts as core, adjacent, or transformational. And that can be really helpful as you're trying to get a good sense of your balance, identifying the balance in your organization. So how to win looks at the lowest level is use existing products and assets. A little more innovative is adding incremental products and assets. And finally, developing entirely new products and assets. So that's the how to win factor. The where to play, serving your existing markets and customers. Moving on then to entering adjacent markets. So maybe you sell kids' toothbrushes, and you're moving into an adjacent market now with an electric kids' toothbrush. So it's new, it's an innovative product, but it's an adjacent marketplace. And then finally, creating brand new markets, targeting new customers. And as we said, the transformational side of this, developing breakthroughs and inventing things for markets that don't yet exist, is the highest risk, but also the most profitable and the most likely to boost you ahead of your competition. The core, optimizing existing products for existing customers, this is really good for maintaining and your day-to-day operations. You need a solid basis here to keep the company going and keep the product flowing. And then in the middle, the adjacent, expanding from existing business into new to the company business, is kind of that interim step where you're branching out a little bit. Maybe you're taking on some sustaining innovations, and those are important too. They're good quick wins and can boost the bottom line and allow you to stay focused on your transformational objectives. So you can look at the things that you're working on from an improvement and innovation standpoint, categorize them against these criteria, how to win, where to play, and look at where they land, and then decide, gee, do I have everything in core? Maybe we need to be coming up with some new initiatives that get us into the adjacent or transformational. Or the opposite. Wow, we have everything in transformational. We've really got our necks stuck out. We need to step back a little bit and focus on some more core and adjacent initiatives. Just a way to help you with your strategies, help executives get a better sense of their innovation balance. A decision matrix can be very useful. If you think about the innovation process, the first step is to come up with your needs, identify the needs of your customers and where your opportunities are and what solutions are available to meet those needs and opportunities. But then you need to come to some decisions about which ones you are going to move forward with. So having a good decision-making process is critical to a good innovation program. One example is the Pew Matrix. And in this model, you prioritize a list of options based on weighted criteria. So some examples of weighted criteria are the effectiveness of the solution, the feasibility, your capability to do it, how much support you have or will have to provide. So this is an example from ASQ. They're trying to solve a problem here, the problem being long wait time. And you can see the criteria, the weighted criteria across the top. Customer pain is weighted with a 5, ease to solve weighted with a 2, and so on. The sub-problems within that long wait time that they've identified, having to wait for the host. And they say that is a high, big problem. The problems are ranked as high, medium, low. So then you take the ranking times the weight of the criteria to get a number. So you can see if they're waiting for the host, they said that was a high or a 3, nothing else for the customer to do. They multiply that times customer pain waiting of 5 to get 15. So you just go through that exercise and then tally up the numbers, and you can see over on the right-hand side, customers waiting for the host was the top problem at 28. And so that's likely to be the one that they're going to tackle first as they look at solutions for this problem. But you can couch this in many different ways, including what I just said of you can have your opportunity at the top and all your solutions down the side and use it as a way to select which solution you're going to pursue going forward. Another tool is the value factor analysis. And remember, we said that innovation must add value to be considered an innovation. So how are we going to know if that's the case? Well, we need to start thinking of ways to measure the value. And typically, you're going to assess the value by a ratio of benefits over costs. And you can come up with a factor if you do that. Benefits are going to be a factor of the product's quality and what it adds, how much convenience it provides to the customer, but also how important it is to the customer. So it might be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but if the customers don't care about it, it's not really going to be a big benefit. So there's 2 pieces to benefits. Similarly with costs, what are the costs? But in terms of the value factor, you have to consider the costs relative to the importance to the customer. So once you've determined those 2 things, you can calculate benefits over costs and come up with the value factor. Let's go back. So how are you going to use that? Well, a couple of different things come to mind. If you can calculate the value factor, Again, thinking back to the decision matrix, if you have a list of possible solutions, you can calculate the value factor for each of them, and that may help you decide which one is most likely going to be well received by your customers and which one you want to pursue. You can also use it during development of a solution. So you start out with the value factor, you decide you're going to pursue it, develop it, optimize it, get it ready for market. You might want to check that value factor at a couple of key points along the way to make sure that as you optimize it, you're enhancing or certainly not detracting from the value factor you thought you had. It's a good idea to keep track of that as you move forward, because it might change as you get more information and tweak it. Your value factor might change. You can also use it to compare with competitor options. You can calculate your value factor compared to competitive solutions out there as a way to measure whether you have a chance at competing or not. So there's a lot of useful things you can do with the value factor. So wrapping up here, is it innovation or improvement? I would recommend that you define the terms that work best in your environment so that you're all talking the same language, but don't get too hung up on black and white definitions. Focus on finding the best balance of value-creating initiatives and then manage them effectively. A great example of that balance is the company Corning. They've been around for 130 plus years. They have always had a core competency in glass technology, and they've been very successful in a variety of different areas of glass technology, one of them being fiber optics. And back in the 60s, well, first of all, Corning has an approach where they are constantly balancing their innovation initiatives. They always maintain some high-risk ones, some mid-risk ones, and some low-risk ones, and they constantly are rebalancing. As one project either succeeds and moves into routine production or fails and they decide they're not going after it anymore, then they rebalance, and they hire people that can deal with that. They hire people that aren't tied to a specific initiative, but people that are willing to move on to other initiatives and rebalance as they move forward. So one of the things they did back in the 60s was they recognized they were scanning the marketplace, as is a good idea, and they recognized that with telecommunications coming along, the telephone was expanding into widespread use at the time. And they recognized that the infrastructure to support telecommunications, which was based on copper wires, was not going to be able to keep up with demand. They also knew that glass could be a conductor of communications. And so they decided strategically that they were going to develop a glass technology to get into the telecommunications market. It took them 4 years of research just to come up with the fiber optics model, and then another 20 years to build the marketplace of fiber optics in widespread use. They've been hugely successful with that. It's been a big moneymaker for them. Fiber optics are still being used, around the world. But they took the commitment. They took the plunge and went into that, even though they knew it was a long-term goal. And they balanced that with other lower risk projects and products in order to support that long-term risk. So it's very important to manage your balance effectively and have some of each of those types of innovations and improvements in your portfolio. So with that, I will wrap it up and open this up for questions. Thank you for your attention. And I'm going to ask Jose just to step in here and let me know if any questions have come in while I switch back over to the view where I can see the chat room.
So Jane, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very enlightening. And I think now participants who have your presentation have a better understanding on the difference between innovation and improvement and how they relate to each other. So we have one question, and maybe instead of using the chat room, I can just say it. So the question is, could you give an example of an innovation of a service rather than a product? That is the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a service might be something like automating. A call tree automation could be considered a service innovation. You're providing service to your customers. A lot of organizations now provide chat room as well as direct calls for service products, for servicing products, so that you have some options as a customer. You can choose the one that works best for you. So the first time somebody put a chat room up for service, I would have said that was an innovation in a service model. That's one example that comes to mind. Another one might be filling your own gas tank. That was kind of revolutionary a few years ago. And some people might not consider that a benefit or value to the customer, but most of us kind of would rather just zip into the gas station, fill the gas tank, and move on, and not have to deal with an attendant and going inside to pay and everything. So that's another service model that was pretty disruptive, pretty breakthrough at the time. Now, most gas stations do that unless you live in New Jersey, but that would be another example of a service innovation.
Yeah, thank you very much for your response. Yeah, so we have asked participants to post questions on the Google Plus page. We don't see many questions now, but I think like the amount of information that you were able to cover is really broad, and you gave specific examples on how innovation and improvement are really working in cooperation, or how companies can incorporate those concepts and make them and adapt them to make them work. So with that said, I think that we can wrap this webinar. I think hopefully participants, I'm pretty sure they have gained a lot of knowledge and a lot of insights from these presentations. And I would like to remind that this presentation is going to be uploaded in the ASQ Innovation YouTube channel. So anyone who didn't have the chance to see this presentation, they're going to be able to see that. So with that said, Jane, thank you very much for your time and for presenting this valuable information. And we thank also the participants who join us live on this broadcast.
Thank you, Jose. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.